Good morning, everybody. My name is Mark Agnifilo, and I want to welcome everyone who's here today, everyone who is in Washington, D.C., elsewhere in the United States, throughout the European Union, and in Spain. I have the distinct pleasure of being able to introduce the people here on our panel. My name, again, is Mark Agnifilo. I'm a founding partner of a firm here in New York called Agnifilo & Trotter. Next to me is Robert Amsterdam. I've had the great pleasure of working with Bob Amsterdam and Amsterdam & Partners in a variety of matters, primarily international matters, for well over a decade. We're strategic partners in a number of cases. Bob is unlike any lawyer that I know, and that's just not because he's here and a friend of mine. He is probably more responsible than any lawyer that I've ever met for single-handedly taking on governments, taking on causes other lawyers would not get involved in, and his track record of bravery, which is not a term used for a lot of lawyers, and success is without parallel. Bob and I have been working on this matter, and we will continue to do so. And so it's my distinct pleasure to present to you Bob Amsterdam, my friend and colleague. Next to Mr. Amsterdam, we have Lawrence Hill. Mr. Hill is a tax specialist from Steptoe & Johnson, which is a firm that we also work with based here in New York. He is an international tax litigator. He is a true tax specialist, and he has been working on this matter with Bob for a number of months. Next to Mr. Hill, we have Santiago Gomez. Santiago is an associate at Steptoe in the International Trade Protection unit of that law firm. He also held a position as the former head of congressional affairs for the government of Colombia in the embassy in Washington, D.C. And without further ado, I'll welcome you all again. Thank you all for joining, and I turn the floor over to my colleagues. Thank you all.
Buenos días a todos. Mi nombre es Santiago Gómez, soy un asociado en la práctica de Derecho Comercial y Derecho Tributario Internacional en Steptoe LLP. Para mí es hoy un gran honor poderle dar la bienvenida a este distinguido panel de expertos que van a compartir un estudio muy riguroso que se ha hecho de las prácticas fiscales en España y de la forma en que se observan diferentes tipos de abusos procedimentales que conciernen a los Estados Unidos y al mundo entero. Primero, me permito presentar al abogado Mark Agnifilo. Mark es uno de los socios principales de su propia firma, Agnifilo & Trotter. Mark tiene una experiencia muy significativa en la defensa criminal de individuos y de compañías en los Estados Unidos. También es un gran placer poder presentar a Bob Amsterdam, socio principal en Amsterdam Partners, una distinguida figura del mundo del análisis jurídico y en este caso responsable por abanderarse de causas tan significativas como lo es la defensa del derecho, del Estado de Derecho y de los derechos de los contribuyentes en España. Last but not least, que no sea lo último, Larry Hill, con gran experiencia en temas de derecho tributario internacional. Larry es un practicante con un récord de éxito sin precedentes en el mundo del derecho tributario internacional y en el litigio fiscal de los Estados Unidos. Sin más, le damos la bienvenida al señor Bob Amsterdam, por favor. Bob, if you will. Thank you.
Good morning. I want to say, firstly, to all of my friends in Spain, that we are here fulfilling our promise. And our promise to the people of Spain has been that we will expose the behavior of the Hacienda, the tax administration of Spain, to a worldwide audience. Because the tax administration of Spain is an absolute outlier. They are operating contrary to the rule of law. They are damaging the lives of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Spanish citizens, and to the benefit of Spanish citizens, discriminating strongly against American citizens. 50,000 Americans bought the lie that they could come to Spain for a better life and found themselves harassed and subject to the most vile bureaucratic games, which ended up ruining their sojourn in a country blessed by God with some of the most wonderful people and some of the most wonderful locations in the world. I know that many of you have woken up some days to stories about celebrated actors and soccer players, the Ronaldos, the Shakiras, who are famous and celebrated throughout the world, but are criminalized in Spain. A few days ago, a newspaper covered the case of a famous individual in private capital and equity. And that newspaper even offered to its readers the fact that the law was never settled on the issues the Spanish government was charging this man criminally with. But this is what Spain does. They criminalize their best and brightest. They destroy their entrepreneurial class. And while doing that, they developed the Beckham Law, which we call the bait and switch transaction, which lures foreigners into Spain, grants them a phony certificate, then strategically arranges for audits to occur 3, 4, 5 years later. And so individuals who save a couple of $100,000 on their taxes end up having to pay the Spanish Hacienda millions of dollars. And I'm going to tell you why this happens. It happens because the Spanish government, which is completely dysfunctional, and we're going to talk about that later. This is a country that hasn't had a budget in 3 years. It's a country in permanent parliamentary lockdown. What happens is they need to get money, and the way they do it is they incentivize tax auditors in a manner that is completely and transparently corrupt. What they do is they have these auditors get a piece of the action, a slice of the money that they take from the hapless American or other foreign investor, or for that matter, from other Spanish citizens. This is an undisclosed commission that these individuals get, and let me tell you, it's not minor. The last year, it was 282 million euros. This is big money. And why is this so dangerous? Because you are incentivizing people to attack, to act as predators of foreigners and your own citizens. And these individuals have no payback if they're wrong. There is no discipline, although I'm sure it exists in law, but in actuality, their bonuses are never touched. So, in addition to this, in Spain, unlike almost every other country in the world, you have to pay your tax and insane penalties of 75 to 150% upfront. And then, after they take your inheritance from you, you're locked in their courts for 3 years, their administrative tax courts, which the court in Luxembourg has already ruled are non-independent. And then you're locked up in Spanish justice for another 5 years. So after 8 or 10 years, you may get justice. And in fact, if you can withstand this unprecedented assault on Americans and others, you have a better than 50% chance of winning. But this isn't rule of law. This is coercion. This is defamation. Because once these penalties are criminalized, once people like Messi and Ronaldo and Shakira are tainted with these types of charges and assessments, their lives are never fully validated again. So we have found, in addition to the danger of this corrupt bonus, Spain is, unfortunately, a country that cannot be trusted with confidential information. I have to tell you that the general prosecutor of Spain is under indictment for sharing tax information of a political enemy. He is not alone. Dozens of high-level officials in both the tax and other areas of the Spanish government are under indictment or under investigation. The Prime Minister's own family, his wife, his brother, under investigation. This is a situation that is almost without comparison. I mean, I think of Papadoc Duvalier in Haiti or maybe Chavez. It's very hard to come up with who you compare not only Sanchez to, but his ability to pretend he is a human rights defender when he is in charge of one of the most predatory, expropriatory organizations in the world, taking money wrongly from Spanish and foreign citizens, while he can't even put a budget through Parliament. Zero accountability. And what he does is he uses a bypass. They write out decrees contrary to the Spanish Constitution. And when they get a negative judgment from the Supreme Court, they try to find a rework or a rewire through these royal decrees. And they violate the basic tenets of a democratic society. So the intimidation of professionals in Spain is almost unparalleled. In a career of mine that's gone now in its 5th decade, I have worked in some of the toughest, roughest countries on earth. I don't think I've ever seen a legal or accounting profession where when you ask for help as a foreign lawyer to a local, you are told with, we can't go near the Hacienda or we will lose our practice, we will lose our family cohesion, everyone will be audited. I've experienced some of this myself. I was to give a speech at the University of Seville just a few weeks ago, and the government interfered in my ability to express myself freely and hardballed the university administration. Our findings in this ongoing investigation that Dr. Chris Wales and I are doing, our findings that Spain is a complete outlier are validated by the facts. In a recent survey done by an international tax institute, 37% of corporate respondents said that the compliance burden in Spain was a disincentive, compared to 6% in the UK. When it comes to this abuse of confidential information, there is icing on the cake. We have gone, my firm has gone to Treasury, and we have discussed the fact that the Spanish government cannot be entrusted with sensitive tax information of U.S. citizens. One, because it engages in politically targeted audits, and two, because it uses that information in politically hostile ways against perceived opponents. And by the way, again, this is fact. This is not, any form of suspicion. We have the cases. They have indicted these people. It's ongoing. And I have to say, respectfully, we believe we've gotten a fair hearing, and we are continuing to pursue the matter. And we are looking at what trade and other remedies may be available. Now, I'm going to break for a minute so that my colleague can say some of this in Spanish, and then I'll come back.
I can attempt to convey the passion with which you speak, Bob, but I need many more years of practice to achieve that. So, parte de este debate y parte de este análisis que nos presenta el señor Amsterdam pasa por reconocer la promesa que se le ha hecho a los contribuyentes de España de proteger sus derechos, especialmente no solo los contribuyentes españoles, pero los contribuyentes del mundo que se acogieron a la ley Beckham. La ley Beckham es un conjunto de artículos que permiten a los expatriados radicarse en España y adquirir una serie de beneficios tributarios. Más de 50,000 individuos de los Estados Unidos decidieron acogerse a los beneficios de la ley. Y centenares de personas se encontraron que después de encontrar todos estos beneficios y estos incentivos de la ley Beckham, llegaron a España para observar auditorías de la administración tributaria que rayan con la unidad familiar, la tranquilidad, una serie de auditorías que casi entran en el universo de lo intimidatorio. Pareciera entonces, nos presenta el señor Amsterdam, que la ley Beckham es una especie de artificio diseñado para motivar o atraer a grandes personalidades, a grandes capitales hacia España para luego cambiar las condiciones, cambiar el Estado de Derecho y llevarlos a ellos a que financien algunos de los déficits fiscales a través de esta campaña de intimidación y de auditorías expansivas. En este contexto se observan diferentes prácticas que son de especial dificultad para los principios del Estado de Derecho. Primero, que las multas se pagan con anticipación, antes de que comience el litigio. Es casi que un prejuzgamiento. Segundo, que las Cortes han encontrado repetidas veces que no hay garantías procesales, es decir, que los contribuyentes no pueden defender sus intereses con suficiencia. Adicionalmente, se ha encontrado que muchos de los oficiales de la Administración Tributaria Española han sido sujetos a investigaciones o incluso a condenas, lo cual despierta una cierta duda frente a la transparencia con la cual se están ejecutando estas auditorías. Tantísimos decretos parecen haber sido promulgados en contravía de los principios democráticos y de estabilidad. En este contexto, nos presenta el señor Amsterdam que las auditorías y la forma con la cual se está ejerciendo el poder de investigación fiscal en Europa y específicamente en España pueden conllevar a que los Estados Unidos no pueda continuar cooperando con España en virtud del tratado para evitar la doble imposición entre los dos países.
I wanted to address as well the fact that the Spanish government, the Hacienda, when they attack a taxpayer, because I'm not going to call it an audit, I'm going to call it what it is, an attack, they know they're engaged in extortion. And that's why we have a guy with 2 decades of going after the mafia giving us some advice on how we're going to deal with some of the folks running the operation in Spain, because they are engaging in an extortionate shakedown. Because once they get your money and they know that they are going to hold the money for 10 years, they make a series of offers to you. To take some words out of The Godfather, they try to give you an offer you can't refuse. So for a clean deal with a negotiated tax base, no formal assessment, and no chance to appeal, the taxpayer can have a discount of 65% of the penalty. But for a deal with a formal assessment, the taxpayer can have a double discount if he doesn't appeal against the penalty. And for the same deal with an assessment but the right to appeal, the discount is reduced. So they work hard to try to get you out of the court system where they know they're going to have some problems. So in Spain, if you're one of these Americans or you're a local and you're facing this type of fight in court, let me explain what happens. Number one, the tax department gives you 100 pages to try to fill out. And if you don't fill it out perfectly, then you have to deal with the fact that when you go to court, instead of being met with a presumption of innocence, you are met with a presumption of veracity, which means that it is, in fact, the auditor who walks into court with the presumption operating in his favor, which is completely violative of the European Convention and basic equity and fairness. Then, if you're a foreigner and you've been induced in this bait and switch to come to Spain, the Spanish government, if they deem that for some technical reason you haven't qualified under the Beckham regime, they will then tax your entire worldwide income. So you can go to Spain, you can think you're saving $300,000 and shielding your worldwide income. But when you get a penalty, you actually could pay millions of dollars in penalties and interest in addition to the taxes, again, based on the structure of the Spanish system, or wait 10 years. And the Spanish regularly fail to recognize structures that involve trusts, structures that involve holding companies, again, criminalizing tax practices that are absolutely normal in countries outside of Spain. The case of Ana Duarte is a very important case. She is a Spanish actress, a famous actress, who decided to take on the system. Ana took on the system for 10 years. The assault on her took some of her most productive years. And now, after a 10-year struggle where she was vindicated, the government is again appealing. In addition to Ana, her longtime tax advisor was found guilty. He is a man of 70. He is taking care of a wife with cancer. And he was given a sentence of 60 years. This is what you are dealing with in the manner in which the Hacienda operates. And as I've told my friends in Spain, our hope is that the discrimination against citizens of the United States and citizens of the EU will allow us to use international remedies to bring rule of law and justice to Spain when it comes to taxation and when it comes to putting some limits on a hacienda that is completely out of control. Thank you very much. Santiago?
Gracias, Bob. En este contexto, lo que se observa son auditorías que casi que entran en el universo de la extorsión. Las oportunidades para apelar son muy limitadas y en muchos casos están condicionadas a que exista un prepago de las sanciones o de la deuda fiscal. En ese caso, los incentivos para litigar se afectan y esto inmediatamente elimina las fronteras del debido proceso. Además, existe una presunción de culpabilidad. Esto es casi contrario a los principios democráticos que abogan por un principio por una presunción de inocencia. En este caso, la ley Beckham presume, o más bien la función de investigación de la ley Beckham utiliza una figura que jurídicamente se contempla y es la simulación. A través de esta figura jurídica, lo que se hace es remover todos los principios de los contratos, de la constitución de las empresas, todos estos elementos que los emprendedores utilizan para estructurar sus negocios y sencillamente se eliminan como si no existiesen en la realidad. Esto envía un mensaje distinto a los emprendedores que no pueden entender si sus negocios se están organizando adecuadamente frente a la ley, cuando para efectos tributarios esta estructura no es válida. Un caso ejemplar de este tipo de auditorías que han llevado al estrés y a la fatiga es el caso de Ana Duarte, una famosa actriz española que después de 10 años de tortuosas auditorías, habiéndose encontrado validada en sus posiciones fiscales, observa ahora que el Estado español ha apelado su caso. Y su asesor tributario en particular, un profesional de la tercera edad, que además está cuidando de su esposa con cáncer, fue condenado a más de 60 años de cárcel. Por ello, es necesario considerar los instrumentos de derecho tributario y de derecho internacional para traer estabilidad y derecho, Estado de Derecho, democracia a los contribuyentes españoles.
As you could tell from Bob's comments, Spain has one of the most draconian and aggressive tax regimes of any I've ever witnessed in the free world. It's aberrational. It's characterized by disturbing incentives to tax auditors, due process concerns, harassment, and intimidation of taxpayers, and abusive, vexatious discovery tactics. It's engaging in a systemic pattern of bad faith practices aimed at increasing revenue. Yes, the Hacienda is engaged in wearing down non-resident taxpayers, we call them patriots, like a picador before the ultimate faena or coup de grace. Unsuspecting residents are lured to Spain for certified tax benefits with the hope of contributing to the economy and, of course, for the wonderful people and culture, sunshine and beaches, wine and food, but they awake from their siesta to the nightmare of the Hacienda. The Hacienda's bending it like Beckham, and they deserve a red card for it. It's a bait and switch. Patriots are offered favorable tax incentives, are given the imprimatur of the Spanish government in the form of a certificate that declares their qualification for the favorable tax regime. And years later, the Hacienda comes in and audits them, claiming they failed to qualify. As Bob mentioned, their tax inspectors are offered incentive bonuses for the amount of tax they assess, even if it's not ultimately upheld. The more tax they assess, the more of a benefit they personally gain. They're not rewarded for no-change audits. They benefit from the larger the amount of the tax assessment, the more in their pocket. This is aberrational. When they can't prove their case up front by facts, they impute fraud through a process called simulación. It's inferred by them, and it's presumed. And the taxpayer then has the burden of showing that there was no such fraud. They're faced not only with exorbitant assessments and significant penalties and interest, up to 125% in terms of penalties. The Spanish tax authority engaged in worldwide fishing expeditions for discovery and to bring worldwide income and assets under their ambit in some instances where there's no nexus whatsoever to Spain. The cost of defense is exorbitant, and Spain often seeks completely irrelevant information. It's the proverbial proctological examination. These global fishing expeditions abuse and manipulate the exchange of information provisions of Article 27 of the U.S.-Spain Treaty. The way Spain conducts themselves violates public policy, due process concerns, and there is a legitimate concern about taxpayer confidentiality. All in all, it's something that the U.S. government is becoming aware of, and others around the world are becoming aware of it, and we're hoping that action is taken to review treaty requests more rigorously and to deter Spain from this conduct against American citizens and others.
Nos presenta el señor Larry Hill su perspectiva del régimen tributario español, que parece tener visos de ser draconiano con tácticas de investigación bastante arbitrarias. Pareciera que la belleza de España, de la Costa Brava, del diluvio cultural de Barcelona es sencillamente una forma de incentivar y atraer a los inversionistas para luego cambiar las condiciones. Y un ejemplo de eso son las auditorías que indirectamente remuneran a los auditores por el impuesto o el déficit tributario adeudado, no por el impuesto final a pagar, por ejemplo. De allí se deriva un incentivo perverso que motivaría a los auditores a incrementar el valor de esos impuestos calculados sobre la base del cual se avanza la investigación. Es importante también considerar el debido proceso como una salvaguardia casi de carácter universal, que aplica en Estados Unidos, que aplica en Europa, que aplica bajo el derecho internacional. Y esas preocupaciones frente al debido proceso también se derivan en preocupaciones frente a la confidencialidad y la privacidad de la información tributaria. En este sentido, nos comenta el señor Larry Hill que el gobierno de los Estados Unidos ya está al tanto de la situación y que está considerando todo tipo de medidas y que espera además que estas medidas puedan incluir algún tipo de remedio comercial.
Hi again, everybody. I'm going to speak very briefly about what my role in this matter is, other than introducing my colleagues. As Bob said, I was a prosecutor for many, many years, and I brought cases for many, many years against different criminal networks, organizations, things like that, financial cases, other types of cases. We're proceeding on every available front. The front that is foremost today is public awareness. And Bob said that he's keeping a promise that he made to the Spanish people. And that's really what today is about, basically making the world, the press, the people, everyone listening, aware of this situation. But there are other fronts as well. And one of the other fronts is we're taking a look. This is a work in progress, so I'm not prepared at this point to give any conclusions because there haven't been any conclusions reached, is to see whether under international law or under U.S. law, if laws and rules were broken related to conflicts of interest. It would be a conflict of interest, certainly in the United States, for a public official to take personal gain from the discharge of that public official's duties. There are bribery statutes that discuss that. There are extortion statutes, official color of right statutes that discuss that in the United States. And we're looking at all of the different legal possibilities. At this point, I'm not prepared to say anything else about it, only to tell the world that we are proceeding on every available front. And I don't know that unless there's questions, I'm going to be speaking with you again. So thank you all again for coming.
Bueno, nos reitera el señor Mark que este es un ejercicio que avanza el compromiso del señor Amsterdam de su promesa con el contribuyente español de traer justicia en este tipo de auditorías y de desarrollo de la función investigativa de la autoridad tributaria. En este sentido, nos comenta el señor Mark que se están considerando todas las avenidas, incluidas las leyes en los Estados Unidos que cubren los conflictos de interés, leyes que pueden tener efectos internacionales y que pueden tener incluso efectos en el ámbito del derecho penal. Por ejemplo, se está evaluando si este tipo de conflictos de interés, cuando un auditor recibe una especie de incentivo por ejercer esencialmente lo que es su función pública, si esto puede constituir una especie de actividad sancionable que pueda estar enmarcada en estos estatutos penales, por ejemplo, en estatutos en el sentido de la extorsión o incluso de la intimidación. En este momento, el señor Mark nos comenta que no es posible concluir si este tipo de actividades caben dentro de ese aspecto, pero que se están evaluando todas las posibilidades.
One final comment. I would ask all the lawyers who have been involved in these cases, whether it's for celebrities, whether it's for the gentleman who was named as part of CVC, all of them should get together and make sure that we push back on any requests from Spain for information from other countries. Spain should not be afforded the presumption of regularity. They do not have a system that justifies that presumption. We may not be able to save the lives already ruined, some of these celebrities who have been tainted with the criminalization of acts that were often completely without any form of mens rea or criminal thought. But we certainly can, in the future, restrict Spain's ability to misuse tax treaties, misuse criminal agreements, and continue to attack citizens of other countries as well as their own citizens. I have said it before, and I have said it again. For a country such as Spain that talks about the war on fraud, I want to say the war on fraud begins at home with the Spanish government. Thank you.
Para concluir, el señor Bob Amsterdam nos menciona que le gustaría mandar un mensaje a todos los abogados, a todos los adalits, representantes de individuos o de compañías que estén enfrentando estas dificultades, especialmente abogados de personas que se hayan acogido a la ley Beckham, y los insta a que alcen sus voces y denoten en el escenario nacional e internacional que la administración tributaria española no está operando en un estado de regularidad o con una presunción con suficiente propiedad. En este sentido, nos comenta que este tipo de prácticas casi que vergen en el universo del fraude y por lo tanto es necesario entrar a la acción.
Yeah, we have some questions from the live stream for Bob. The first is a two-part question from Mercedes Serraler of the Spanish digital news outlet Voz Populi. First part, is Donald Trump aware of how the Spanish Agencia Tributaria operates?
Look, Donald Trump is aware of many issues involving Spain. Whether he has been particularly briefed on these issues, that would come as a result of our meetings at Treasury, which took place at the highest level. Whether that found its way into a briefing, I don't know, but I am quite certain as our work continues, he will be made aware of this.
And the second part, if you don't mind, will these practices imply sanctions for Spanish companies and investors?
At this point, you know, we have really gone to the government of Spain to discuss change. At this point, we're not going to talk about whatever remedies we may seek down the road. We're still hopeful of trying to engage in a dialogue. What the Spanish government has to do is stop defaming those of us who are trying to get justice for people in Spain and start listening to the fact that their behavior cannot continue. Because what makes their behavior 1,000 times more dangerous today than yesterday is AI. Because they are engaged in these illegal, ongoing breaches of data protection, the aggregation of data by countries that are clearly non-compliant with GDPR and international data protection statutes, let alone the treaty, represents an existential danger to all of us. And that is a key reason why we are pushing so hard for reform.
One additional question, if you don't mind. Are you talking to congressmen who've already dealt with contracts that the Spanish government has had with Huawei regarding national security?
We are in the process. We have sent a letter, a recent letter, yesterday, I believe, addressing the Huawei issue. The Huawei issue, as I said, is icing on the cake with respect to a government violating the treaties, violating OECD standards, violating its own laws and constitution, and generally a government that is, I would say now you'd have to call it at best authoritarian. Certainly not democratic. They have no parliament that's functioning. They're ruling by royal decree. So I would say we would call it a non-rule of law, non-compliant government.
We have a two-part question from Monique Zamora from OK Diario. Your white paper suggests that the fiscal apparatus in Spain operates without proper checks and balances with kickbacks for inspectors. Can you share an anonymized case or example of this?
Look, we have 450 cases. We got a case last night. And again, I want to make clear to the Spanish government that continues to think my firm is, we're trying to roust up, business as a result of this. We're actually not in the business of doing tax litigation. So all the work we're doing with respect to Spain, we're doing for the benefit of some clients and the Spanish people, but we're not interested in more Spanish clients. I don't practice Spanish law. I don't practice tax law. That's why I brought in Steptoe, who I think are probably the world leaders in tax, because I wanted to make sure we had the best. This is an email I got last night. If you want, I'll just briefly read it to you. This is from a gentleman right now in Barcelona. I read press articles concerning your firm's procedures. My company was basically destroyed by an unfair and predatory procedure. We were in legal proceedings for over 4 years that we finally won. But the process was so long and so destructive on both our company and our personal reputation that we are now in the process of liquidation. So now I have to basically restart my professional life from scratch at 58 years old. Now, I will tell you that this is one of hundreds. When I gave a talk in Seville, we were comforting a Dutch retiree whose husband had had, I'm not sure whether he had had 2 heart attacks or 3 heart attacks, that they called Hacienda attacks because their lives had been ruined. And when the woman went to the tax office to complain, she was met by people with anonymized numbers who didn't want to give their names. I mean, it's a completely outrageous system. I mean, in a discussion yesterday, my colleague here was talking about, well, we haven't studied North Korea, but that may be the only one that's close in terms of figuring out how the Spanish behave. And when, you know, really, I don't often think of these celebrities like Shakira and Ronaldo and others, because, you know, they live great lives, but their lives and their reputations were seriously impacted by the Spanish government without any grace or acknowledgement. These are people that brought billions of dollars in revenue to Spain, and yet the government attacks them because they're looking for scalps. They're looking for big-name people to attack and take down so that they can continue to instill fear in the populace.
We have another question here from Elena Barro from the Spanish digital newspaper The Objective, who's asking, what consequences do you think a U.S. Treasury investigation into the use of Huawei could have this year?
Look, the consequences could be very severe. Very severe. And we're exploring those, but we're not going to even venture. You know, unlike the Spanish government, we actually are going to think through, on the basis of due process, how we can deal with these issues and how the United States can deal with these issues. So we're not going to speculate. Obviously, the Spanish government could be subject to various trade and other remedies if they don't clean up their act with respect to a tax organization which relies on fascist-era laws to use draconian measures, seizure of bank account, reputational damage, publishing your names in newspapers for tax avoidance. I mean, things that are just outrageous. They put all together into one horrific soup that the Spanish people and those foreigners who go to Spain have to swallow.
Bueno, brevemente para discutir algunas de las preguntas de la audiencia, ¿qué tipo de sanciones, se pregunta, podrían considerarse hacia España en el marco de esta controversia? Nos comentaba el señor Amsterdam que en este momento no se puede comentar específicamente qué tipo de sanciones podrían considerarse, pero que ciertamente hay preocupaciones muy serias sobre el régimen de privacidad de la información, sobre el régimen de protección de datos y sobre los tratados internacionales que aplican al respecto. Por eso se sugiere y se insta al gobierno de España a que tome reformas serias de la forma como se está manejando la protección de los datos. En segundo lugar, se pregunta si el presidente Trump está al tanto de esta situación. Nos comenta el señor Amsterdam que se han enviado cartas al respecto y se han presentado estas preocupaciones, pero no es posible determinar si el presidente Trump ya conoce de esta situación, puesto que las reuniones se han tenido con el Departamento del Tesoro solamente recientemente. Adicionalmente, nos preguntan sobre un caso anónimo, un ejemplo que pueda demostrar este tipo de prácticas. Se sugiere el caso de una auditoría de un emprendedor de 58 años, quien después de 4 años de auditorías prevaleció en el proceso, pero prácticamente tuvo que empezar de ceros. En este sentido, se menciona que el impacto para las vidas de los contribuyentes investigados es verdaderamente significativo. Finalmente, se pregunta sobre las investigaciones y tal vez las sanciones que podrían avanzarse desde los Estados Unidos hacia España y las consecuencias que esto podría tener. Nos comenta el señor Amsterdam que las consecuencias pueden ser muy graves. En este momento se están considerando remedios jurídicos desde la perspectiva del debido proceso, pero en particular podrían considerarse remedios comerciales en este caso, puesto que los ataques al buen nombre de la Agencia Tributaria Española y los estratagemas de auditoría son bastante intimidatorios.
One last point that my Spanish colleagues wanted me to raise is the case of the former Prime Minister Zapatero. You talk about what is going to get Donald Trump's interest. Mr. Zapatero, on behalf of Prime Minister Sanchez, is acting as an intermediary with respect to both Venezuela and China. There is no active tax investigation, although his net worth has grown by multiples that are exponential. And what people in Spain and others see is a tax agency that operates as a political puppy of the party in power, blinding themselves to the behavior of the Prime Minister's brother or Zapatero, and yet when it comes to the cop on the beat or the poor woman who's in a mental hospital who writes to us, they seize their bank accounts, they take their cars, they behave in a manner with absolute impunity. And the behavior in terms of Zapatero, which is coming up in the press day in and day out, is something that is getting the world's attention as well.
Bueno, un comentario final del señor Amsterdam en referencia a la conducta del primer ministro Zapatero. Nos sugiere el señor Amsterdam que el patrimonio del ex primer ministro ha incrementado significativamente y que esto alude posiblemente a una cierta intervención, casi como intermediario de Nicolás Maduro. Y esto bajo el auspicio o el reconocimiento del primer ministro Sánchez.
That concludes this event. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.